execution. I can out-execute anybody in this industry. Any idea in multifamily right now is a good idea. Companies that aren't really focused on and understanding what AI will do are making a bad mistake. Why do people move? They'll put down, you give them the 10 categories of why are you moving, why are you leaving my building? And most of them will put moving out of the area. But it truly comes down to the second one, which is maintenance issues or poor upkeep of property. The new millionaires are going to be the plumbers, the electricians, and the maintenance people. There are three things in this industry that separate good companies from mediocre companies. Number one is having the right personnel working on your team. Number two, if you don't have the right strategy, you will fail. And then the entire process comes down to the big E.
I think one of the coolest things, and thanks for flying all the way out from your beautiful ranch in Utah, just for us. You know, you have roots all over the country, work with so many different people, and I think one of the things is that you are so humble. It's almost like sometimes you jump in and you jump out in a good way. You're so supportive of people like myself and have been the backbone of many people's careers, and they count on you as for this mentorship. But to fly out here for us, to be here to speak with us, we're really excited to have you here. So thank you for making the trip.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. You know what I think of you and Adrian and how much I respect what you're trying to do for the industry. It's a leap forward for, I think, the industry to have these sorts of interchanges and discussions that talk about the industry. So I'm really honored to sit here in this chair and meet with you too. So,
and I don't think a lot of people realize that you've been a part of at least 4 major leading companies in the multifamily industry, but you've also been in the behind the scenes working on technology and innovations and feedback. You've led, some of these probably large rollouts, helped people and supported them, and you were obviously a big impact on us. But can you tell me a little bit more about why you continue after retiring a couple of times? Why do you continue to push yourself to come out here and work with these people? What excites you about this industry?
I think the multifamily industry is one of the most exciting industries there is. If you look at the model of multifamily, if I'm in retail, I have one chance to make a good impression with my customer. They come into a store, they buy the shirt, it's either a good or a bad experience, and that determines how they're going to be a long-term customer. In multifamily, you have 365 days to make an impact on your customer. And if you approach it that way and you understand that model, it's an exciting business. But not only that, but I think we're in a very exciting period in multifamily. I think a lot of people are rethinking their strategies and their models. And I think people are really trying to integrate technology with the personal touch, and making sure that personal touch stays in place while they're trying to leverage efficiencies. So I think it's really an exciting time, and I've been telling the people that I'm consulting and working with that 2025 and 2026 are going to be reset years. It's going to be one of the most exciting, thought-provoking periods in multifamily. So I'm really excited to be here and be a part of this industry, and I've been a part of this industry for 40 years and have led 4 major companies and had an opportunity of really seeing multifamily from all levels, not only operations, but leading companies as well as on the development side. So I think I understand the business. I wish I knew it more about it, but it excites me. This business excites me.
Talking about technology and talking about the future, there's a few angles here, but I'm going to start with just one. PropTech companies that have been successful, they went through some exits, and there's cash available. They're investing in real estate. I just recently spoke with a founder that sold a few companies, and now he's looking to purchase property management companies and use them as vehicle to build amazing tech that will disrupt the industry. How do you see this play? I know that we had a RKW, right? RKW was purchased by a technology company just 3 years ago, and then there were a couple of others that I think they're about to happen, and that type of mindset from tech transitioning into multifamily. How do you see this playing? Is this going to be something that we'll see more of, you believe, or less of? Or it was just kind of
when I started in the industry, there was no technology. We still had paperwork orders. We still had billing sheets. We send out paper receipts. Everything was very manual. And we were a neglected industry with technology for a long, long time. And then several people decided, hey, multifamily is a great way. There's lots of ways to create efficiencies in multifamily. Let's look at that and let's explore how technology can improve it. And so I think more and more people are looking at multifamily, not only from creating efficiencies, but it's a great way for me to push out my products to a mass of people and a mass of industries that have been neglected for so long. Any idea in multifamily right now is a good idea, and because we've been neglected from a technology standpoint for so long. So I think it's a very smart strategy. If I were a tech person and I could insert myself into 300 people's homes, or I could insert myself into 600 people's homes or 1,000 people's homes, I'd do that every day.
I think something that's really interesting to that point that Adrian brought up is, also thinking about the opportunities that exist.
Mm-hmm.
You think about, we had Dr. Debbie Phillips here on the couch, and she was
Love
someone,
her.
that you've connected me to, and she's so impactful and eternal optimist. I think about you. There's many people who are pessimistic, many people who say things will not work, but you were always trying to be on the cutting edge, whether or not you rolled out everything, but you were an eternal optimist. How do you stay so optimistic? How do you continue to learn so much and push yourself to learn?
I think it comes down to several factors. I get enthused because I get to be around people that I really like. I get to be around people that are smart. I get to be around people that are forward thinking. I get to be around people that are creating ideas. Other than being in an industry that's already created a crust or a shell around itself, this industry is still growing and still trying to identify itself and still trying to create efficiencies in this business and breaking old models. And that's what gets me excited every day, and how you look at the industry is very important, and how you build your strategies around that are very, very important. And I've always been a strategy guy. If you don't have the right strategy, nothing works. And unfortunately, as I've been doing a lot more consulting, there are a lot of companies that don't have strategies that are effective and forward thinking. The thing that's made me most excited and why I've always looked at technology as the answer is that I was here in this industry before computers. And so I saw what an impact computers made to the on-site staff and to us getting more knowledge on how to best benefit the residents. Looking at things that are going to improve that customer experience has always been my mantra. How do I make your living experience, those 365 days that I can make an impression, how can I make it better? And it's through better technology, better communication, and better execution of your strategy. And so that's what gets me excited. How do I break something? How do I look at something and break it and make it better has always been my mantra. And Chris, we had an opportunity of really looking at the package systems and how package delivery to apartment communities was being handled several years ago. And we came up with, I think, an innovative solution together with your company and my company that changed the way people are looking at package delivery. And now a lot of people are getting back into that space and breaking that model again and finding different ways of doing it. So I've always been excited because I get to break models. I get to break and look at things differently, and that's what gets me excited about this industry. There is so much opportunity right now, and like I said, it's a reset year. People are really rethinking everything, every piece of their strategy as it applies to the customer experience and how they're interrelating with customers.
Interesting you said, because Adrian and I have people on, we think about strategy and doubling down on that. I want to ask you about centralization, because it's very difficult. You took a leap on us. You take a leap, obviously, when you're taking a leap on a company or an early stage, versus a point solution, deciding on centralization internally. So what are your thoughts on companies doubling down on centralization versus companies who are pulling back? Do you have an opinion there?
I don't.
Okay.
Once again, it's strategy. Okay. Whatever your strategy is as a company should be that strategy, and you don't let the interference get into that strategy. And that's where I think a lot of people fell. They have a good strategy, but they let all the noise surrounding it affect how they execute. And I've always been a very strong believer that there are three things in this industry that separate good companies from mediocre companies. And I learned this when I was coaching college football. When I would go to these conferences and I'd be sitting with 1,000 of the smartest guys in football, and we would get up there on the chalkboard, they would be writing down the same things, and I'd say, I know that. And the guy next to me knows that. What causes you to be a champion while I'm not a champion? And it comes down to three things. Number one is having the right personnel working on your team. If you don't have the right people on your team, you're not going to be successful. Number two, if you don't have the right strategy, you will fail. You have to have a strategy you believe in, something that you can communicate and get other people to believe in, and then the entire process comes down to the big E, execution. I can out-execute anybody in this industry. And that has always been my philosophy. And the only way that I can out-execute you is be ahead of you in looking at technology, things that will improve the business, and breaking old models. So that's been my whole philosophy, and that's where I think companies, if you're going to go centralization, understand why you're going to centralization, how you're leveraging those efficiencies, and then do it. And do it well. And give your people the tools to do it right, and communicate why you're doing it to the benefit of the customer and to your employees. So I don't care if you go to centralization or you pull back from centralization, but be smart about how you're doing it. And I don't think you can talk about centralization without jumping into what impact AI is going to have over the next little while. And I've had an opportunity of spending a good deal of time over the last few weeks talking to probably one of the smartest men in this industry, the person I really respect, a guy that I hired out of Cornell on AI and what he sees happening with AI. And AI is going to change the model again. It's going to break the model. It's going to allow us to look at different options. It's going to allow us to leverage efficiencies. But it doesn't mean that you have to be centralized, but it's going to help centralization. Centralization is not a buzzword. It is creating and leveraging efficiencies. There's a lot of redundant tasks in our industry, a lot of redundant tasks for associates. And if I can offload those to a AI that is thoughtful, communicative, data-driven, large language models, that's going to help every one of our employees be better. And as this person told me, and which I thought was a great thought, he goes, AI will not replace you. A person that knows AI will replace you. And that's the truth. So companies that aren't really focused on and understanding what AI will do are making, I think, a bad mistake. But you can't talk about centralization without AI. But it doesn't mean that centralization is the answer. And that's what I'm saying. If the company has a strategy that they believe in and they can execute it well, that strategy will work.
Ultimately, AI is just a tool, right? If we're looking at AI as a saving grace, like the cure for all evil in the industry, probably like you said, we're looking at it wrong. With that being said, I have a thought about jobs in general. And I believe that within our lifetime, we will see that every single job that exists today is going to be challenged. And then what's going to happen like 5-10 years from now, when we're going to look back, we're going to see some of the jobs will be completely eliminated. It doesn't mean that AI is a bad thing, because while some jobs are being eliminated, other jobs will be created. We have to remember, because it goes back to the Industrial Revolution, when people were afraid of the steam engine because they're going to put, the horses and the buggies out of business. That didn't happen. You needed people to maintain the steam engines and so on and so forth, and running them and fixing them. The same thing I think happens now with AI. You're going to need people to write prompts. You're going to need people to oversee the process of what AI does. So our jobs are going to be, some of them will disappear. New jobs will appear. Some of them will be trimmed. Not a single job today is going to look the same 5 years, even 5 years from now. A lot of them probably even 6 months from now. It's going to be different. Some new jobs will come into the workplace. Now, with that context, and my belief, right, and please disagree if you think I'm wrong, I'd like to get your take on what would you think about the leasing and the maintenance jobs? How are they going to be affected, if in any way, and how do you foresee them in the future?
I think leasing is probably the most vulnerable. There's people that are exceptionally good salespeople, but they are very few. Our leasing positions at our sites are the ones that have the highest amount of turnover. The average leasing person stays on your site 18 months. It takes you 3 months to make that person efficient. Then they spend the next 13 months or 15 months doing their job, and then they leave you. And so then there's a hiring process, there's a training process, there's getting someone up to speed, and then they leave you. That's where I think the AI is going to be very, very beneficial. If you look at the tasks of a leasing person, there are 7 to 8 major tasks that leasing person is required to do. Number one is answer prospect questions and telephone calls. Texting and making sure that you're keeping that prospect informed and with any sorts of specials or anything else that's in the marketplace or any advantages that your property has. The next is paperwork, the lease paperwork and how you handle the lease paperwork. So all of these functions, some of them are very manual and can be automated quickly. As this person that I talked to that is thinking about, he's got 200 engineers working on AI and rethinking AI as it's going to impact our business. He says that right now, the bot or an AI closes at 10 to 20% better than a live human being. So I think if you had a whole stable of very strong leasing people, I would say stay with it. Don't use AI, but you don't. They turn over too quickly. And then you have that training process. And here's the other big issue with, as I've worked with companies and rethought this leasing model, is that if you centralize leasing, your exposure is greater for turnover. So let's say that you have a stable group of people that are your centralized leasing team, and you lose one of those individuals that could impact 7 to 10 properties. That's a bigger impact than you losing one person on one site that can be replaced. So having that whole strategy as to how you're going to handle the leasing process and turnover and training and education is the whole thing. Not just saying I'm going to centralize leasing. That doesn't work. It's understanding every one of those tasks, how it's designed, what impact it has on your residents, what impact it has on your sales force, and your sales and closing ratios. So I see that as most vulnerable. And as this person that I was talking to about AI, because I'm very fascinated and I think it's really going to change the industry, he says the new millionaires are going to be the plumbers, the electricians, and the maintenance people. Because no building is the same. You can't send a robot in pre-programmed to diagnose something. It takes a human being to understand that this may be wired incorrectly or this may be improperly built. And so I think maintenance, and I think a lot of companies, to your point, Adrian, are really beginning to rethink maintenance and the impact. I don't see thoughtful companies getting rid of maintenance or centralizing maintenance for a number of reasons. I did a study about 8 to 10 years ago, and we looked at the number of transactions that take place on a piece of real estate, on a multifamily building. And we looked at all of those transactions, from paying rent to customer complaints to everything, work orders and all of that. Your maintenance team has 10 times the transactions with your customer than anyone else on that site. And so you eliminate that, and it ruins all 5 of the top 7 core competencies. Every company in multifamily looks at 7 core competencies. There are 7 core competencies in our business. Number 1 is marketing. Number 2 is merchandising. Number 3 is finding, hiring, training, and educating the very best people. There is operations. There's financial management. There's revenue management. How many of those are impacted by maintenance? Marketing, absolutely. There's your ratings and reviews. There are the people that really understand that customer service that gets you those great ratings and reviews. Merchandising, wrapping the package, they're there. You go through every one of them. Financial, how they spend their money, how they keep the building up. all of those things. That's very hard to replace. Someone that's impacting 7 of your core competencies is very hard to replace or very hard to centralize. So I'm not as worried about maintenance centralization as I am leasing. And your turnover on your good maintenance teams is much, much lower than your leasing. So you get someone on site, they become dedicated to you on site, they do a great job on site. It's like the story that you shared on LinkedIn, Adrian, maybe 2 weeks ago, about how you turned a property, a large property that had 1,000, I think you said, outstanding work orders. It's that mindset of being visible, being proactive, being accountable, and making sure things are done. So I don't see as a big impact on centralizing maintenance with good companies as I do with the leasing. That was probably a long answer, more than you wanted, but
No. There's a lot to. I'm the type of person that processes replace. So there's a lot for me to think about. So thank you for sharing that, and really thank you for the long answer. If you were to think about some jobs at the site level to be today broken down and rebuilt in a different way, what would those jobs be, and how would you imagine that happening?
I think every one of them, and as I said at the very beginning, Adrian, if you as a leader aren't breaking down every position and looking at redundancies and looking at creating efficiencies and giving your investors the best bang for their buck on expenses, then you're not doing the right job. But I think the ones that I would really break down first is assistant manager. I think there's a lot of redundancy. Now, you get into trouble there if you start eliminating assistant managers, because now how do you groom your future manager?
You disrupt the path.
Yep, you disrupt the path. And so you disrupt that next path for the manager, which is a big thing. But then look at your hours. A person can only work 40 hours. So a manager, you're gonna not have people covering at a decision-making level on site all 7 days, which it requires. And so there's lots of things that can be disrupted, but there's lots of things that can be improved and creating greater efficiencies. And that's what gets me excited. I look in my consulting right now, I'm looking at every position. I'm looking at for redundancies. How can we make it more effective? How can we push this into some other area or some sort of tech introduction and make it better? And that's what my career has been centered around. How do I make it all goes back to the customer. How do I make that customer's experience? And that's why I think we led, while I was a partner at Wood Partners, why we led and had the top Aura score, which is your ratings and reviews, online ratings and reviews, the top award 5 out of the 6 years I was there. Because if you look at the customer first, if your ratings and reviews are higher, you lease quicker, your vacancy loss goes down, you have more customers looking at you from a prospective standpoint. So it's really understanding that whole focus around customer. And that's where I think asset managers and people that are just fully financially focused lose that whole concept. It's about the customer. And the better you treat that customer, the better you build systems around that customer, the more you're going to be. So let's talk expenses, because that's really a good one too, which leads into this whole thing. If you were to reduce the number of turnovers on a site, would that reduce your expenses?
100%.
Yeah. And you probably would save, because it costs between $800 and $900 to turn a unit, depending on the condition of it, in terms of the cleaning, the contractors, all of these kinds of things. And then you have the vacancy loss associated. If you were able to cut that down, that would pay for a maintenance person.
100%. And imagine how much more that maintenance person could bring to the table, like increase the
marketing, the
renewal rates.
Yeah,
renewal rates are too.
Yeah.
Every time you're not turning a unit, there's money in a bank.
That's right.
There's money you don't spend.
Yeah.
And just increasing, like if you go from like a 50% renewal rate to just a 50% to a 60%, that means you increase your renewals by 20%.
Yeah.
Like it's so much into the numbers. And like the better you understand the numbers, you see the scalability. how this could be like incredible. It's not exponential, but it's like a significant story to be told out there.
And why do people leave? Why do people move? They'll put down, you give them the 10 categories of why are you moving, why are you leaving my building, right? And most of them will put moving out of the area. But it truly comes down to the second one, which is maintenance issues or poor upkeep of property. That is the number one and number two reasons for leaving. Now, if you were able to improve number two, the property is merchandised and looks fantastic, service orders are well maintained and taken care of, your renewal rate goes up to 62, 63%, which is real money. As a leader, as someone that's run companies, I'm not a leader, I'm not saying that, but as someone that's led companies, the first thing that I look on a P&L is vacancy loss, because that will tell me the problems with the property quicker than anything else. If the vacancy loss is high, there's things that you need to look at. There's things that you need to identify, and there's things that you need to do. It's how you approach the business. And once again, it comes down to the customer. We're losing focus on the customer, I think, in this industry. And the more we focus on that experience, it's like the question on centralized leasing. What am I giving up by not having that person greeted when their U-Haul pulls up, taken to their unit, shown the unit, identifying how to work the thermostat, introducing them to the service manager? What am I losing from that? Am I losing 10 basis points on rent? Am I increasing my expenses for turnover? Those kinds of questions are the ones that intrigue me and get me really excited. And that's where I think that whole teamwork of management and service and technology, all of those meet at an intersection to create that great customer experience.
That's something you touched on, especially whether it's the human elements and the feeling of knowing your maintenance team, knowing they're going to follow up, knowing you have the right touch points and not the wrong ones. We talked about hospitality.
Yeah.
Great hotels like the Ritz-Carlton, Thompson, great restaurants.
Yeah.
Where you have, it seemed when we had a meal, they were coming at the right time. Always encouraging us, not nitpicking or tearing back, but improving that experience. So I think about robotics. When you think about AI, the touch points, as you said, am I getting the human interaction, but where do you see, because robots will not solve everything, but there's certain elements. Where do you see robots, and have you even seen some case studies of
I haven't seen it successfully.
Okay,
I've heard lots and lots of discussions. I mean, restaurants are now using the robots to deliver, but would you want a robot delivering your food at the place we ate at last night? Were we attended to? Was that customer service off the charts?
Unreal.
When the manager of the restaurant comes up and offers us a sushi roll that they had made special for one of our guests, and when they bring another sushi roll just to say thank you for being our customer, I'll go back there. And I will continue to spend money at those kinds of things. That's the same thing with the renter. Sometimes we shortcut the process thinking we're saving money when we're costing. It's like preventative maintenance. If you take maintenance off the building, if you take maintenance and centralize it, who does all the preventative maintenance? Who keeps the building running? I used to take great pride as a leader if I could go through a disposition of an asset without getting retraded for something that wasn't taken care of and something that was obviously could have been taken care of under my leadership. Once again, I can't tell you how important maintenance is to the overall success of a building. It's a marriage. It is truly a marriage, but it's a marriage of strategy and execution. It's executing things exceptionally well. And you can't execute unless you really understand the business. And that's where most people don't want to dig in. They don't want to understand. They don't want to look at the big strategy. They don't want to, and I'm amazed. I am truly amazed when I meet with some companies. But
so you mentioned today, I'm going to double down on that, as you mentioned today from a hospitality standpoint, an experience. And if we take some of the learnings, you've traveled. I'm still shocked how much you travel, how much you write, how much you interact with these incredible leaders. But you're also one with wilderness. So you're interacting with technology, different orgs. Share with me, some of the frustrations you see, but also maybe some of the ways that multifamily can understand. Like I think about, like you talked about earlier, maybe robotics isn't the answer, but what are some of the things that you think can be learned from a hotel group, learned from a restaurant group to be brought over, and especially like if the app doesn't work, if the integration doesn't work,
right?
What are some of those key things that you see working that maybe, or there's opportunities for multifamily from other sectors?
That's a phenomenal question, Chris, and let me just walk you back a few years.
Sure.
I went to an Apple store to buy my very first Apple computer, and I saw that they weren't behind a desk. They were out there demonstrating. They were out there working with you on the computer. They were showing you the difference between a Dell and an Apple. They were really doing a good job. So I said, can I take this back? And I'm in Chicago at the time, running a company in Chicago. And I said, can I take this model back and change the way we do leasing? That's when we introduced iPads. We were the first company to do iPads, get people away from the desk, putting demonstrations on the walls so that as you're walking, you can show the amenities on the walls. We didn't want our leasing people behind the desk. If we're not learning from other industries, if we don't learn from other people, if we don't ask people their opinions, we become siloed. And there are lots of great ideas out there. I'm amazed as I'm working with many companies. A marketing, very AI-oriented marketing company that's going to have great success over time. I'm working with a company that's really looked at insurance costs, and they've come up with a very creative, very innovative, and effective way of closing down water intrusion, which is the number one insurance claim, is water intrusion on a building. Nobody's looking at it. They just pay the premiums for the insurance instead of looking at how do I solve it. And this company that I'm working with has found a solution. So if we don't go outside, we don't think about the industry differently. We don't break down and we don't break everything. As I used to tell all of the people that worked with me, break it. Because when you try to put it back together, you'll understand all the working parts. But I want you breaking things. I want you to tear it apart. And I do not want you to just sign off on my strategy. I want collaboration. I'm a big believer in core values, that every person needs to have certain core values to be in a leadership position, and identifying those core values and making them very definitive. I've always handed out my 10 values to every employee that comes to work with me or for me, because I want them to know who they're working for. I want them to know what I stand for and what I'm looking for them to contribute. And number 2 on that values list is collaboration. I want people to look at what I'm saying, evaluate it, and then give me feedback. I don't want to just force things down from high on. I think that's where a lot of companies, every company is great. I'm not saying that. But I think there are levels of success. And I think the ones that are highly successful are those that build a collaborative environment, a collaborative culture where everyone has a seat at the table and they have a voice. That to me is, we've got to look at the hospitality. And I'm telling everyone I'm working with, you want to know your renter of the future? You better be digging into student housing. You better be understanding that to the nth degree, how people want to be communicated to, how they want to interact, what sorts of services they're expecting. And you better go to senior housing and understand it, because more people like me with gray hair are moving in. That percentage of residents, when I started in this business, was 8%. Now, that market out there and resident profiles, of all these resident profiles I go through on buildings, it's building up to 15 to 18 to 20% of a building are people that are retired now, that want to take their equity out of their homes and rent. So if you really want to think of the future, you better be thinking of how senior housing is being run, and you better think about how student housing is being done. And then, once again, it's focused on customer. So hospitality is huge. That whole mindset of customer, resident, 365 times you can make an impact to get the renewal. And that's what I want people thinking about when they're on site. I got 365 times I can make an impact. And that, to me, changes the whole mindset of a person on site, an employee. If I can make 365 impressions, I'm winning.
Keep on eye on the trends. Is that's what you're saying? But there's another aspect here: disruption, right? There's things that we can't really foresee, right? Or sometimes maybe we can, because we're looking outside the industry. We see what's happening in the world, and we see it coming for us as an industry. What do you think about a major disruption being possible in multifamily within the next probably 3 to 5 years? Like something that will shake the way we do business at core, will change it. Like not just a little bit here or a little bit there, just like, let's just think about, how McDonald's operates business, or how Amazon, or how Uber does, service, that type of like disruption, like just something like completely out of the box. Do you see that happening? And if you see it, what do you think that's gonna be?
I've never been very good at forecasting, so I wouldn't dare, because everything, I read people's forecasts. We were supposed to be in a recession 3 months ago, and that hasn't happened. And, inflation was supposed to increase with all the tariffs, and now we're at 2.1%, right where the Fed wants us. I think predictions are dangerous, but I do see some disruptions coming in the industry. And number one is the first thing that you stated, Adrian, when we started this conversation, is that people that aren't real estate professionals are buying real estate and investing. How is that going to disrupt the customer service model? And what does that do to that model? And not only that, I'm working with a company right now that's a REIT that is doing all of their share purchases on Bitcoin. And changing that whole model of how you can own and purchase real estate, which is the first company I've ever seen do that. So I think there's a couple things. The mindset of the people that are now investing in real estate will change it, because they will really, really focus on technology and really infuse even more technology into it. What I pray is that they still focus on the customer as they do that. And I could give a great example of that with the airline that I'm flying right now, on lack of customer service through technology. But it all comes down to who's owning the real estate, how are they owning that real estate, and there's going to be lots of things that. Let me go back 40 years. When I started in this business, as I stated, we were all paper-based. Everything was paper-based. Then we got into computers. And we said, you know what? This is going to be a great way for us to keep a rent roll. And that's as far as our vision went. Where are we now? I didn't have one tech person working for me when I first got in this business. I just left Wood Partners, and we had 25 specialists on technology. So I can't say where it's going to be, but AI is going to change it, Adrian. AI is going to change the way we think. I can't predict, because look what the computer did. It went everywhere and influenced us from the leasing process with the iPads to everything. That's what AI, we can't even forecast what it's going to do. We can't even, because we've gone from classic to generative to agentic in 3 years. And agentic is going to change the world. My bot speaking to your bot. And the way that we leverage that is going to be very, very important. And how we think through the systems and the processes to do that. So I can't forecast, but it's going to be exciting. I really can't wait. And we're doing some very big projects with the companies I'm working with. We're watching that very closely, and that's why I was on the phone with that person that I was talking about earlier, who's really light years ahead of anyone else in terms of thinking it. It's going to be good. It could be disruptive if handled incorrectly, but the smart people that are staying on top of it, talking to people, they will not let it be disruptive to the whole process in their company. And that, I think, is the beauty of strategy. I think it's the beauty of hiring smart people. I think that there are 3 characteristics when you hire someone that have always been very important to me as I've hired. If I can hire to these 3 characteristics, I can't be too disruptive, I can't be too innovative, and I can't be too forward-thinking. Number 1 is hire people with high abstract reasoning. Those people that can think outside the box, those people that can solve their own issues, those people that see opportunities. So that's the first score I always looked at when we were hiring someone is, what is their abstract reasoning score? Number 2 is, what is their empathy? How well do they play with others? What kind of person are they? Are they values driven? Do they have an empathetic feel for the customer, for the company, for that? And then high work ethic. Those individuals that really can execute. That's how I win football games, is out executing you. And that's what I want to do. As I want to out execute you, I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do it smarter. And I'm going to do it faster because I've got all these abstract reasoning folks behind me that are ready to move. And that's where it's not good. If a person's abstract reasoning score comes down, it's difficult for them to change. It's difficult for them to recognize opportunities. It's hard for them to recognize why you're doing it because they want to go back to the old way of doing it. And so if you hire abstract people with high abstract reasoning, they can see the opportunity, they can see where things are going, and they're all on board. I hate keeping using the word leader. I don't see myself as that. But how well I communicate the vision to someone, that's what separates, I think, a leader from a manager, is that ability to take your vision and get it across to that person so clearly and so concisely that they can see it too. And that's what I felt my obligation was, is to communicate. Harvard Business Review says out of all of these characteristics that lead to promotion and success, the number 1 on that list, above education, experience, everything else, was the ability to communicate effectively. And if I can do that, I can inspire anyone. I can inspire anyone if I communicate well and I can get them to see that vision. And that's what's not going to cause the disruption in some companies, while it will cause disruption in people that can't see the value or opportunity.
Well, and you hit on a great point, is that I don't think there's a single person out there who say they're not innovative. But in actuality, you'll see people on stage saying they're innovative, yet they won't roll out things, and they'll oftentimes shut down conversations and whatnot. What is, and we talked a lot about the operator side. You've developed buildings, you've led management companies, you've overseen assets of billions of dollars, right?
Yes.
And led those teams. Now on the supplier side, there's thousands of companies trying to get into multifamily. You've obviously overseen though realty.
Yeah, I'm seeing it firsthand.
I've seen it firsthand, but you think about thousands of companies. Not everyone shows up to all these events, but they're hitting these companies up. What do you think most of them are getting wrong? And because I think, you said you can break things, but you also have to play by the rules, especially at many companies, of integrations, implementation. What are they getting wrong? Is it on the integration side at the front end? Is it what does the rollout look like? As everyone's sharing stats of, I do this and I do that. What does it really mean? What are they getting wrong?
It means nothing for a company to come to me and talk to me about being a part of our team as a supplier if you don't prove to me the benefit. I want to know the benefit. What is the marginal increase in opportunity and benefit that you bring to me that I'm not getting from my current provider and from my current situation? For example, there's lots of different ideas out there, let's say in marketing. Or even better, I think this example was tremendous last night. We had a great conversation with another president of a very large management company last night at dinner, is fraud. There are 20 some odd companies out there that want to do your screening and work on your fraud problem. What's your marginality? What is the margin of increase that you're going to bring to me, whether the reduction in fraud, evictions, or something by using you than my existing company? And that's where I think suppliers and technology companies are having a hard time, is identifying that benefit to the company. Why don't I just stay with my current stack of management software instead of taking the pain with my IT company and the slight disruption it causes when you roll something out? I've got to have a benefit, and you're not demonstrating me that benefit. If you can demonstrate that benefit, I'll use you every time. I will go with you, and I will get excited, and I'll sell you, and I think most of the companies are not selling benefit and really understanding what those benefits are. And the second problem there, Chris, is most companies don't truly understand their full tech package. So instead of really understanding their full tech package, they'll say, oh, well, let's implement something else in, when the current software does it, but they're just unaware of it. At Wood, we were having this problem with IT, and this smart lady that we hired to really look at the software, she says, I can toggle that and switch it to this. And we're all going, my heavens, we have spent a painful year looking at different solutions, and all I had to do was toggle a switch on my existing software. That just goes back to, are you leveraging every efficiency? Are you getting the most of everything, from your employees to your tech package to your, it just all boils down to, are you leveraging? And you can't leverage efficiencies if you really don't understand the business. If you don't know it to a granular level, you're not going to be able to solve it. Because the next shiny thing, you're going to be like a crow pecking at that next shiny bead that's on the sand that someone brings you. And so I think that good companies, and the companies that I'm working with right now, is my whole spiel is sell the benefit. You have to understand the benefit. If they use you, what's going to be their increase in terms of closing ratios, time on your website, all those metrics that we all know. And I won't go through that long list, but it's a great question, Chris, and I think it's appropriate.
I want to kind of stay on topic here. We went from being a no-tech industry to droning in tech.
Uh-huh.
There's companies requiring for their entry-level employees leasing agents, specifically to be proficient in like 60 different softwares, pieces of technology. And let's just be honest, that's not reasonable, that's not realistic.
And it's not productive.
It's completely counterproductive, and it pushes people toward, like, I had the saying that we ended up punishing people with technology. Trying to help them, we're actually punishing them. When you tell an entry-level employee, you gotta know like this many, you gotta proficient this many, softwares. Like, that's not actually help. Like, it's never gonna be like well received. So how do we go through that selection process, audit process, and get down to, this is, from what I'm hearing, right, a pretty widespread situation in the industry. How do we vet? How do we get that tech stack to the very minimum, to maybe like 3 to 5 core operating systems, and just like have those do all the jobs, versus like having to be in like the Apple store when you log into with your employee credentials. I actually used to work for a large operator that when I logged in, everything looked like an Apple store when I logged into the tech stack. Yeah. Literally did. Like, and in a way it's amazing, because like I have so many options, but then like people wanted to know, like they wanted to know the basics is taken care of. Like, although it's great to have the shiny objects and the latest technology out there, it makes it very difficult when you put in front of an employee 60, 70, 100 different options, and just say, you could pick whatever you like, or like pick whatever you deem is like needed for the task at hand.
What do you think is the most important thing in terms of customer expectations?
The most
consistency. They want to see consistency. If I went to that restaurant last night, had that great customer service, I go back the next time. I'm not going if it's bad. Our employees want to see that same thing, that consistency, because they are our customer. When I went to Wood Partners, and this isn't just Wood Partners issue, it's every company that I've touched over my career and working now as a consultant, is I went in with 123 different software programs running. we hired the IT specialist that used to work for me at another company. My edict to him was take it to 20. Take it to 20. I want to leverage every system that I've got. I want to maximize it. I want to know it. And I want to make sure that everyone else knows it. And we were more productive. We were more consistent because the package, and that's what I'm finding right now as I'm working with different companies. They're finding ways of consolidating. And that goes back to your question, Chris, is how do new suppliers get in? If everyone's consulting their software and they're really trying to get down to one or two things, you gotta show that huge benefit, and it's got to be quantitative. And right now, with this big focus on expenses, I've never seen anything quite like it. We let things like insurance just batter us, so we don't really focus in on how to lower that. And we're allowing the tax base to be what it is. So the next biggest, and the mortgage, I can't change that unless I go restructure my loan. So where do I focus? On personnel. So I try to lower the number of people on site. I try to hold salaries down. I don't go out and hire the smartest people with high abstract reasoning, people with the empathy, people with a high work ethic. I let expenses dictate it. And what was the last time that you saw this happen? You weren't even born yet. When I went through this in 1998 with the Tax Reform Act of Ronald Reagan, when real estate was just devastated. And the banks owned all the real estate. And all of these, the first thing when you have a financial crisis is you cut expenses, which impact the residents, which impacts their quality of life. You lower the rents, and you start getting a profile on your property that isn't what you really wanted. And it takes you 7 years to change the impact that you made in 6 months. And so really taking is this a short-term thing? Is finding efficiencies is good, but cutting real important expenses from your property is short-sighted. Real estate is a long-term hold. Every decision deserves you to think long-term, outside the box, think to the future. What impact? Every decision you make has an unintended consequence. Everyone, whether it's positive or negative. And you better, as a person managing and leading, to understand what those potential, and that's where we've lost it. We are making decisions right now without looking at the unintended consequences on this real estate. And that's why I think a lot of people are jumping in, like you were mentioning tech companies jumping in to buy real estate, is they see the opportunity. They see the long-term impact. Whereas some owners are quarterly driven, and I've run 2 REITs, so I know quarterly inner earnings. But it's that impact that these short-term decisions make on long-term assets.
I think one of the things you hit on, back to the butterfly effect, essentially.
Yes.
You're thinking about
Absolutely.
the butterfly effect and the things you think about, and they're generally, one of the things I take away from you is that innovation isn't about a one-size-fits-all back to basics. It's what works right for this element. And you've built all types of buildings.
That's
You've
correct.
Managed all types of buildings, all types of markets, urban,
Commercial,
suburban.
I've been in the commercial business too. So.
And you think about places like Pont City Market, Avalon, Battery. You all have been very involved in downtown areas where you have retail and connections. I think about STR, short-term versus long-term. I think about the food and the experience of co-working we talked about. So how do you think about that, of trying new ways to engage the resident to tell their story? They want to live in cool places. And
What
what
did you just do for me today?
You mean
Did
picking
you
you
tour
up?
me?
Or
No, tour me of this
Oh,
building.
touring you here, yeah. The building.
Everything was about experience.
Yep.
Everything was about ability to connect with your fellow tenant. In commercial, we call them tenants. Unfortunately, I hate that word.
Guests, maybe.
Guests or something.
Yeah.
But it's all about the presentation. It's all about feel. It's all about talking to that person at the elevator. How many people have I met just coming into this building?
Yeah.
It's that
I mean,
appeal.
all of
And
that Atlanta tech,
and that's where I think our industry misses is those connection points, having those connection points. Now we do a great job with amenities. Most of them aren't used, unfortunately, and we put them in. But it's that ability to understand what is driving that customer decision and then meeting that expectation. And I did a study 4 years ago, on the number one amenity on a property. Swimming pools, jacuzzis, spas, gyms, basketball, you name it, coffee bars. The number one amenity on a property is the coffee station.
Huh.
That is the most important thing to a resident. And we built brand new. I mean, so we had to stay on the leading edge of innovation because we were building brand new with wood, building 26, 28, 30 properties a year. The number one thing, because it's connection. You meet your residents down there at the.
That's where you build community.
That's right.
That's where the community is built.
But how do you build a community if you don't have if your maintenance people aren't visible, and they're hiding in the shop and they're not visible and they're not doing those kinds of things? It is a complete community, a complete ecosystem that you have to understand, and it's the melding of those. So the great question, but great example in just answering your question is what you did for me today.
Steve, it's been amazing having you on. I just hate that we don't have like 5 hours.
We're going to do this again soon, so we're going to fly you out here again.
At the same time, I look forward to our next one,
Yep.
right? Because there's always going to be a next one. And I'm always excited to, to sit down, to be with you in person here in Chris, and, have very meaningful conversations that matter. So thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for your incredible support and kindness towards both Chris and I, and all of your support over the years. And again, looking forward to see you on the next one.
Well, you know what I think of both of you. I think the world of both of you. I think both of you are doing some amazing things in areas that haven't been explored before, in areas that have been neglected, and bringing people that can make a difference and be thought provokers on a podcast to get people inspired to think differently. I applaud you because it's been overdue, and you guys are doing such an amazing job at NMHC and NAA and all the other organizations that you're doing. Plus, you're staying very current, and you're staying very, very innovative in what you're doing, and you're very much on top of the industry. And it's always a real pleasure to sit down and speak to both of you because you know how I feel about both of you.
Thank you. Well, and thanks for allowing us to tell your story with
Amen.
the world, sharing
Amen.
it. Thanks,
My
Steve.
pleasure. Thanks.
Cheers.